Hello, dear students. Today we will see what is meant by primitive unit cell and the non-primitive unit cell. So last time we have seen what is meant by the space lattice. The space lattice is infinite periodic arrangement of points like this. Infinite periodic arrangement of the points in the three-dimensional space. Two-dimensional view is shown here. I will draw here the two-dimensional lattice like this. The periodic means the every point should have the identical surrounding. You shift to the other point, this point also have the same environment as the earlier. So all the points have the same environment or the identical surrounding. Then such a lattice or the array of points or the arrangement of the point, geometrical arrangement of the points is known as the space lattice here. The every lattice point here, the every point in the lattice is known as the lattice points. It is known as what here? The lattice point. That also we have seen. Lattice points. Every point is known as the lattice points here. So such a two-dimensional lattices or the space lattices are shown in figure A and the shown in figure A. There are so many ways of arranging the points in this space which leads to the definition of the space lattice. This is one type is shown, this is another type is shown, extra atoms, extra here, the points are here. So this also have the same environment. Here is also every point should have the identical surrounding in both the cases. So this is also the space lattice, two-dimensional space lattice. This is also the two-dimensional the space lattice. And in order to convert the geometrical arrangement of the points into the crystal structure, we have to locate the single atom or the group of atoms at every lattice points. Then the crystal structure is formed. The crystal structure is formed, or in order to convert this geometrical arrangement of the points into the crystal structure, the every lattice point is replaced by a single atom or the group of atoms. If it is replaced by the group of atoms, then it is that group is known as the basis here. It is known as what here? The basis. So and then the crystal structure is formed. So in order to have the crystal structure, we must know the two things: lattice, type of lattice plus basis gives rise to what here? The crystal structure. So last time we have seen here crystal structure we are getting. Now in a space lattice, there is a small unit. In the space lattice, there is a small unit we can construct such that the first, it should have high symmetry. It should have high symmetry. This is one condition. Have high symmetry, and the other is nothing but it is bounded by shortest vectors. It is bounded by shortest vectors. Such a unit is known as what here? The unit cell. So by considering these conditions, we will construct a small unit of the block in a space lattice which is known as the unit cell. Here unit cell. Now what is the primitive unit cell? So in this case we can construct by this may be the one unit cell. This we can construct this group here like this, or we can construct the group in this way also. This is the another way of drawing the unit cell in the what here? This space lattice. This is one unit cell, this is the another unit cell. So the crystal structure can be built up by the repetition of this unit cell. This unit cell we consider, so we are getting the repetition like this here. The crystal structure we are getting the building blocks or the repetition of this unit cell. So this is the unit cell. Unit cell can be constructed in the space lattice in such a way that it should have the high symmetry and it is bounded by the shortest vector, and then such a unit cell is we are getting. There are two types of the unit cells: primitive unit cell and the non-primitive unit cell. If here in the unit cell, if the corners of the unit cell are occupied by the atoms, or the corners, only corners have the lattice points, there are no extra lattice points within the cell, then such a unit cell is known as primitive unit cell. So in this figure here, these are the lattice points and the corners of the unit cell, there are only the lattice points, and then such a unit cell is known as what here? The primitive unit cell. In this case, in this such a primitive cell, it is found that the contribution of all the lattice points to per unit cell is always equal to number of lattice points, that is n represents the number of lattice points per unit cell. The contribution, for example, if this here the atoms are located, so corners of the unit cell are only occupied by the atoms here. Then contribution of this atom to this. So the contribution of this atom per unit cell is like this. This much atom is contributed to this. This atom is contributed to. So total number of atoms contributed to this cell is found to be equal to 1. One lattice or the atom. Here the one lattice or atom. Then it is called as the primitive unit cell. So for the primitive unit cell, number of the contribution of all corner atoms per unit cell is equal to 1. Then it is also known as the primitive unit cell. So primitive unit cell is 1 for which the corners are occupied by the lattice or the atoms, and the contribution of all the corner atoms per unit cell is equal to 1. Then it is known as what here? The primitive unit cell. So primitive unit cell is shown in this figure. In case of this also, the another two-dimensional lattice, here is the another primitive unit cell. Corners are occupied by the atoms, and this particularly repetition of this unit cell gives rise to the crystal structure. This is 1. While the non-primitive unit cell is 1. In addition to the corner atoms, unit cell may contains the extra lattice points or the atoms located exactly at the center of unit cell, or at the center of faces of the unit cell or the bases of the unit cell. Then such a unit cell is known as the non-primitive unit cell. Non-primitive unit cell is shown in figure A and B here. Here the corners are occupied by the atoms. In addition to the corner atoms, here are extra 2 lattice points or the atoms exactly located at the center of the faces of the unit cell, or it may be bases. Here bases, if the extra atoms are located at the bases of the unit cell, then also it is allowed. Then it is called as non-primitive unit cell. So if the corners are occupied by the atoms or the lattice point, then it is known as primitive unit cell. And why? If in addition to the corner atoms, there are extra atoms located at interior of the center of the interior of the unit cell, or the faces of the unit cell, center of the faces of the unit cell, or center of the bases of the unit cell. So there are 3 extra atoms are located at the position interior, center of the interior of the unit cell, or center of faces of the unit cell, or center of what here? The bases of the unit cell. Then it is known as primitive unit cell. So for the primitive unit cell, non-primitive unit cell, here the number of atoms per unit cell is always greater than the 1. So remember that in case of primitive unit cell, number of contribution of all the corner atoms per unit cell must be 1. While in case of the non-primitive unit cell, number of atoms, contribution of all number of atoms, corners as well as the interior, those contributions are the difference. Corners, contribution of the corner atoms is same, but contribution of the face centered atom is different. Contribution of the interior atom is complete, and so the number of atoms per non-primitive unit cell is greater than the 1. If it may be 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., then it is known as the non-primitive unit cell. So this is regarding primitive and the non-primitive unit cells. So today we have seen the what is meant by primitive and the non-primitive unit cell, and this is useful while studying the unit cells of the some crystals, that is simple cubic body centered SCP. In those times also we will get the idea regarding the unit cell. Okay, thank you very much.